Hi everyone, and welcome to this presentation, an OER Staff Development Initiative for Librarians, Quick Wins and Lessons Learned. I'm Melody Chin from Singapore Management University Libraries based in Singapore, and part of my role as the coordinator for faculty teaching support involves raising awareness, promoting, and encouraging the use of OER amongst faculty. Firstly, to share some context on OER professional development in Singapore, being a fairly small country, there are limited development opportunities, although there appears to be some interest. Learning opportunities are more at a regional level in ASEAN. So for example, there was a one-day workshop hosted by the ASEAN University Network. And more recently, a regional interest group was launched earlier this year in 2022. A bit more about Singapore Management University, or SMU for short. So we are a medium-sized university, and we have about 400 full-time faculty, and our 8 schools cover the fields of business, accountancy, and computing and information systems, amongst others. But important to note is our professional continuing education growth. So as you can see here, we have 36,000 students in 2021 alone. So if you compare that to our undergraduate and postgraduate population, that's quite a lot. And they are transient short-term students, and they don't have access to any library resources at all. Okay, so there is an opportunity for OER here. So this is sharing a picture of SMU libraries. So we have 2 libraries. They're very nice. Mostly students like to study in there for the aircon because it's really hot outside. Okay, so a brief background. So based on our strategic plan, where we wanted to advocate and integrate open resources into collections. Okay, so up until we had that in our strategic plan, SMU Libraries on OER services existed only as a small sort of one-person initiative. And we had promoted OER in various ways. So for example, emailers, through social media, and through faculty champions. But we still had concerns on sustainability in starting to provide OER services beyond a single librarian. Okay, so in terms of expanding the service sustainably, we would need involvement of all subject research librarians to be involved in advocacy and promotion as well. But the research librarians at SMU had little to no existing knowledge on OER. And based on informal conversations with them, they were hesitant about abilities to answer faculty queries and just hold conversations on OER in general. So that formed the rationale for our OER staff development initiative. So there were several components to this. It included one-to-one coaching sessions, followed by group workshops and a boot camp as well. So all these 3 components were implemented across approximately 9 months. And the idea was to have the conversations from the one-to-one coaching sessions to inform the content for the workshop, which was several months later. So involving the librarians in the design of the workshop content sort of took into account andragogy and engaging adult learners in content planning as well. Okay, so we wanted research librarians to be able to understand the basics of OER and Creative Commons and to confidently have conversations with faculty and advocate for OER. So basically, they needed to be familiar with the various OER platforms within their subject areas for their school so that they can search for relevant resources. Okay, so here are more details on each of the program components. So for the one-to-one coaching sessions, these were 1-hour personal sessions with the OER librarian. They were highly participant-led, so they determined what we talked about. They could decide what questions they wanted to ask, and it was very loosely structured and informal. And it was very much customized based on discipline as well. Okay, so for example, some of the business librarians wanted to know more about case studies, and they talked about how case studies formed a big part of their teaching resources. So we did focus a bit more about that. And much of that conversation was used to form the content for the group workshops, which were 2-hour small group workshops. We had 4 to 5 librarians in each of the workshops, organized by subject area. So the business accounting librarians were in one group and the social sciences law librarians were in the other group. We did have some interactive activities, book club games, and we had quite a good reflection and group discussion for both of the workshops as well. So that formed quite an integral part of the learning process in terms of discussing and sharing their experiences with their peers. And lastly, it concluded with a boot camp, which was a 30 minutes practical exercise on course matching to a real SMU course. Okay, so for this, we used an adapted, shortened version of the Spark OER treasure hunt worksheet, and it was very much a self-guided process with the facilitator input. And at the conclusion of the session, they had the option to use the outputs in their real work with faculty in a real course as well. Okay, so what was covered? We covered the basics such as what is OER, what you can do with it. We also covered searching and evaluating, so the various platforms and in terms of evaluating the suitability of particular OER, and also advocacy with faculty. For example, addressing faculty concerns on adoption, on quality as well. We had a fun WooClap game on sorting the OER licenses based on openness. That was good, but not a single person got it right. So that was quite interesting to know. Okay, so what we wanted to know was, have the respective training initiatives adequately met the goals of developing librarian skills and confidence in advocating for OER? So this led to our research questions of how do the participants perceive that the program has helped to develop their skills in OER, and how do they feel that the program has helped their confidence in OER advocacy to stakeholders. So it's very much twofold here. It wasn't just all about the skills, but it was very much about the confidence as well. So if they were to have conversations with faculty, they had to be confident enough to want to raise the topic of OER with faculty. So we gathered data through semi-structured interviews with selected participants. So we had 4 in total, and grouped by discipline as well. Okay, so 2 from the first workshop and 2 from the second workshop. Okay, so these were some of the key themes that came up. Okay, so I have some quotations here, and the main theme is that the librarians found basic concepts as helpful. Right, so I'll leave this up a little while so you can read. I will read one useful quote though. Okay, so quote, "At least I know what I'm supposed to be looking out for and what will count as OER." Okay, there were a couple of comments you can see here on being able to speak to faculty on OER and knowing enough to have a conversation with faculty on OER. Okay, so that's definitely a win for us. This was one of our goals of the workshop, and we feel that we accomplished that. Okay, the second theme that came up was peer learning. Okay, so peer learning was quite an unexpected benefit. We did allocate some time for group discussion towards the end of the workshop. It was about 15 minutes. But the discussion continued on way beyond that. So participants started to share a little bit more about their experiences with faculty and what queries they had from faculty and what solutions they used. So that was a really engaging conversation, and librarians were interested to hear from each other. Okay, I'll leave that up for a couple of seconds. Okay, I might read out one quote, like, even if finding out just the concerns or even getting to hear from other librarians what were experiences when promoting OER could be very helpful, end quote. Okay, so another win, an unexpected win, but a good one. And the third theme, okay, OER skills acquired but not retained. Okay, so the librarians did highlight that because they weren't using those skills every day, they weren't searching for OER on a daily basis. They didn't need to interpret Creative Commons licenses on a daily basis. So they couldn't quite remember all of it, as the interviews were held some months after the end of the full program. Okay, so I'll leave these quotes up. I'll read one quote. Quote, unless we're going to be looking at licenses very often or talking about them very frequently, like for me, I always feel like in order to retain the knowledge, you still have to apply the knowledge somewhere after that, end quote. Okay, so a lesson learned is to perhaps have more handouts or more resources that they can refer to after the program. Okay, so the boot camp. So this was not a major theme, but it is worth mentioning because it didn't appear to be great for confidence. 30 minutes that was allocated was nowhere near enough. And participants did mention it was difficult, there wasn't enough time. And yeah, so we'll just read out a quote here. Quote, I think that wasn't enough time. I remember searching and searching, then I think I stopped at a certain point, end quote. And another participant did mention it was quite difficult as well. Okay, so lesson learned, definitely to allocate more time and perhaps provide more guidance as well. So just to highlight that the bootcamp was held online due to COVID-19 precautions. So it wasn't easy as the facilitator as well to see where participants were up to jump in to offer help if they looked like they were struggling, because we were all sort of remotely on Zoom. So that could have been a factor as well, but definitely 30 minutes wasn't enough. We needed a lot more time, regardless of the format. Okay, so quick summary on the quick wins and lessons learned. So what worked? The one-to-one conversations and involving librarians in the content development, that really helped a lot because that made them interested to attend the workshop and to learn more about what they had asked from the initial conversations. Another aspect that worked well was starting with the basics and assuming no prior knowledge at all. So we didn't assume that any of them knew a little bit about OER. We started just from the beginning. And for those that did know, the recaps helped with the confidence. And a peer discussion, as mentioned earlier, was an unintended benefit and it worked really well. It definitely facilitated learning from each other and sharing experiences as well. So, what didn't work? So as mentioned earlier, the length of the bootcamp wasn't matched to the assigned exercise. Perhaps a flipped learning activity might have worked better. So for example, we could have given them information to identify their courses earlier, to pick a course in advance for the workshop and the bootcamp, so that would have saved some time in advance as well and would have given them a bit of a head start. And even with interactive activities, with the sorting game and searching for OER, participants reported limited retention of skills. So perhaps that didn't work so well, but I mean, not much we can do for memory, but perhaps more resources that they can refer back to. So as long as they know where to get the help and to look for resources if they need to, for example, research guides on OER, then they need not necessarily remember everything. Okay, so limitations and potential further studies. It was a fairly small sample size for interviews, but I felt like it did help in terms of having self-reported measures as well, because we were assessing confidence as much as skills. So getting to speak to each participant for over an hour on their experiences of the program did yield some fairly valuable insights. For further studies, if we were to run the program again, perhaps we may do pre and post-test studies, and that would allow us to include more participants as well, or all the participants in the workshop. So what's next? We are currently reassessing if the OER staff development initiative should be rolled out to more librarians in the future, and if so, what changes to be made. So there are some obvious changes in terms of expanding the peer learning component a little bit more and providing more support for the bootcamp, perhaps a half-day bootcamp, for example. And there are quite a few new librarians as well, so it's definitely timely for another run. Also in the pipeline, we are looking at adapting the content for faculty and course instructors to have a course instructor session on OER as part of our outreach efforts at SMU. So there's definitely some parts that can be adapted. So we will exclude the parts on faculty advocacy and concerns, but we will probably include more aspects on evaluating OER, modifying OER, for example. So that's coming up soon. So thank you so much. I've come to the end of my presentation, and I'm very glad to have you here today to listen. So if there is time, I'll be very glad to take questions in the Q&A after this. If not, you're very welcome to contact me as well. My contact details are below. Melody Chin at smu.edu.sg. So feel free to drop me an email if you'd like any more information on the staff development initiative at all. Okay, for now, I hope to see you all at other parts of the conference and enjoy a good conference ahead. Thank you.